There is a law that governs all living things. Time only moves forward. It never goes backwards. It never stops. Every second that passes is a second lost forever, one step closer to the inevitable end. Kings grow old, empires fall, civilizations turn to dust, and no amount of power, wealth, or desperate pleading can change that direction. We believe we are the exception when we are young, when we are strong, when the horizon seems infinite. But the universe always collects its debt. There was a man who challenged this. A king who was dying, who received a death sentence directly from a prophet's mouth, and who did something so impossible that physics itself had to be rewritten for a moment. His name was Hezekiah, and what happened in his palace on an afternoon in 701 BC remains one of the most disturbing events ever recorded. Jerusalem, a fortified city in the mountains of Judah. The year is 701 BC, and the air smells of fear. The Assyrian Empire, the most brutal war machine the ancient world has known, is at the gates. Sennacherib, the Assyrian emperor, has conquered 46 fortified cities of Judah in a matter of weeks. His armies not only kill, but skin alive rebellious leaders and nail their skins to the city walls as warnings. They impale entire families. They burn temples. They erase entire civilizations from human memory, and now they are surrounding Jerusalem. Inside the walls, King Hezekiah walks through the corridors of his palace. He is 39 years old. He should be in the prime of his life, making strategic decisions, organizing the defense, inspiring his people. But he cannot, because he is dying. Not on the battlefield, not in a heroic act. He is dying in his bed, consumed by a disease that the texts describe as a malignant ulcer, an infection that has spread through his body like black fire beneath the skin. And then the prophet Isaiah arrives, not with words of comfort, not with vague promises that everything will get better. Isaiah enters the king's chamber and delivers a sentence that leaves no room for interpretation. Thus says the Lord, "Put your house in order, for you shall die. You shall not recover." There is no ambiguity. There is no implicit hope. It is a declaration of fact spoken by a man who speaks in the name of God. Hezekiah has days, perhaps hours. The prophet departs, the door closes, and the king is left alone with his mortality. What happens next is recorded with an uncomfortable level of precision. Hezekiah turns his face toward the wall, not toward his advisors, not toward his family, toward the wall, as if he wants to erase the world, as if the only conversation that matters now is the one no one else can hear. And he begins to cry. Not tears of dignity, not a stoic acceptance of fate. The text says he cried bitterly. A visceral cry, the kind of cry that comes when all masks fall, when power and titles and psychological armor disintegrate and only the terrified animal remains, knowing it is going to die. But Hezekiah does not only cry, he prays. And his prayer is not what you would expect from a dying king. He does not ask for generic mercy. He does not promise to be better in the future. He presents an argument. "Remember, O Lord, I pray, how I have walked before you in truth and with a whole heart, and have done what is good before your eyes." It is a negotiation. It is a reminder. It is a man presenting his case before the judge of the universe, using his history as evidence. He does not beg for charity. He demands justice. And it works. Isaiah has not even left the palace. He is in the middle courtyard when he hears the voice. The same voice that ordered him to pronounce the death sentence now orders him to return. "Go back and tell Hezekiah, leader of my people, I have heard your prayer. I have seen your tears. I will heal you. On the third day, you will go up to the house of the Lord. I will add 15 years to your life." 15 years. Not an ambiguous healing. Not a mysterious remission. Exactly 15 years. A specific, measurable, non-negotiable amount. But there is more, because Hezekiah, even on his deathbed, even after receiving this impossible promise, cannot simply accept it. He asks, "What sign will I have that the Lord will heal me?" It is not enough to hear the prophet's promise. He needs proof. He needs verification. He needs something that breaks the logic of reality so obviously that there is no room for doubt. Isaiah offers him an option. Do you want the shadow of the sundial to move forward 10 degrees, or to go back 10 degrees? It's a strange question, almost cruel in its simplicity. Because advancing the shadow would be impressive, yes, but it would still be within the natural flow of time. It would just be an acceleration, but going backwards. Making time literally go backwards. That violates the second law of thermodynamics. That breaks the fundamental structure of the universe. Ezekiel chooses the impossible. It's easy for the shadow to decline 10 degrees. No for the shadow to go back 10 degrees. He wants the option that shouldn't exist. He wants to see the universe bend, and it happens. The text is clinical in its description. Isaiah cries out to the Lord, and the Lord makes the shadow go back 10 degrees on Ahaz's sundial. It is not a metaphor. It is not poetic language. Ahaz's sundial was a real instrument, a ladder with marked degrees that measured time through the projection of the shadow. And that shadow, which had advanced with the movement of the sun throughout the morning, simply retreats. 10 degrees. As if someone had pressed the rewind button on reality itself. What this physically means is terrifying. For a shadow to retreat, the sun must retreat. And for the sun to retreat from Earth's perspective, one of two things must happen. Either the sun literally reverses its movement in the sky, which is impossible because the sun does not move, we are the ones rotating. Or the Earth stops its rotation and then begins to rotate in the opposite direction for enough time to create that effect, and then stops again and resumes its normal rotation. Both options violate all known laws of physics. Both would require such an immense amount of energy that it would instantly destroy the planet. And yet it happened, and not only in Jerusalem, because here is where history becomes unsettling in a completely different way. The Babylonian astronomers, who kept meticulous records of celestial movements, noted an anomaly that same year. A disturbance in the sky that they could not explain. The Chinese, on the other side of the world, recorded what they called the day the sun retreated during the reign of the Zhou dynasty. Cultures that had no contact with each other, that did not share mythologies, that had no reason to coordinate their records, all documented the same thing. The sun did something impossible. Modern skeptics have tried to explain it in every possible way. It was a misinterpreted eclipse, they say. But eclipses do not last for hours, and they do not make shadows retreat. It was an atmospheric phenomenon, a strange refraction of light. But refractions are not consistent enough to be recorded as specific historical events by multiple civilizations. It was a legend added centuries later to glorify a forgotten king. But that does not explain the non-Israeli astronomical records that match the date. The most honest explanation is also the most uncomfortable. Something happened. Something that does not fit into any physical model we have. Something that requires us to accept that the laws we consider absolute are, at best, revocable permissions. But the miracle of the sun is only half the story. Because while this happens, while the sky behaves in impossible ways, Hezekiah is healed. Isaiah applies a poultice of figs on the ulcer, a remedy so simple that it sounds almost insulting. Crushed figs on a wound that was killing the king of Judah. And it works. In 3 days, Hezekiah is standing. In 3 days, he goes up to the temple. The infection that should have killed him simply disappears, as if it had never existed. And so, with 15 extra years of guaranteed life, with the sun itself as a witness to his renewed covenant with God, Hezekiah does something extraordinary. He saves Jerusalem. When the Assyrians finally attack, when Sennacherib sends his best generals to demand surrender, Hezekiah does not yield. And in a single night, according to biblical records and corroborated by Assyrian sources, 185,000 Assyrian soldiers die in their camps. Not in battle, not from observable illness. They simply die. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing centuries later, records the same campaign and mentions that Sennacherib's army was devastated by mice plagues that gnawed their bows and shields, leaving them defenseless. But the result is the same. Sennacherib retreats. Jerusalem survives. And the empire that had conquered everything in its path simply turns around and leaves. Ezekiel lives his promised 15 years, but they are not peaceful years. Because now he bears the weight of knowing something that no one else in human history has known with certainty. The exact date of his death. Not an approximation. Exact. If he received the promise in 701 BC, then he knows he will die in 686 BC. He knows he has 180 months. He can count the days, and that changes something fundamental in how he lives. During those 15 years, Hezekiah becomes one of the most prosperous kings of Judah. He builds water systems that still exist today. The Siloam Tunnel that cuts through solid rock to ensure Jerusalem's water supply. He accumulates riches, strengthens the walls, has a son, Manasseh, who will eventually inherit the throne. But there is a shadow over all of this. Because every project he begins, every decision he makes, every morning he wakes up, he knows how much time he has left. And as the years pass, that countdown becomes louder. The texts do not record exactly how he died. They only say that he slept with his parents in 686 BC, exactly 15 years after the promise, exactly as he was told. And there is something deeply disturbing about that precision, because it means that each of those 15 years was borrowed. Every sunrise was a gift that he technically should not have received. And when the day finally arrived, when the last of those 540-something borrowed days was used up, the debt was paid exactly as specified. But the story does not end with Hezekiah. It ends with the consequences of giving a man more time than he was supposed to have. Because Manasseh, the son Hezekiah had during those 15 borrowed years, becomes the worst king in Judah's history. He reverses all his father's religious reforms, reintroduces idolatry, sacrifices his own son in fire to pagan gods, fills Jerusalem with the blood of the innocents. And eventually, it is Manasseh's sin that seals Judah's fate. Later prophets will explicitly say that the Babylonian exile, the destruction of the temple, the fall of Jerusalem, all happened because Manasseh caused Judah to sin in a way from which it could not recover. Manasseh only existed because Hezekiah lived 15 extra years. If the king had died when he was supposed to die, Manasseh would never have been born. And if Manasseh had never been born, Judah's history would have been completely different. So a question arises that no one wants to ask. Was the miracle really a gift? Or was it a test that Hezekiah passed, but that his son failed catastrophically? The theologians have wrestled with this for centuries. Some argue that God knew what Manasseh would do and still decided to save Hezekiah, which means that even the worst possible outcome was part of a larger plan. Others argue that giving Hezekiah 15 extra years was a mistake, or at least a concession that God made knowing the consequences but respecting human free will anyway. And others suggest something even darker, that the miracle was a warning disguised as a blessing, a demonstration that just because you can negotiate with the universe doesn't mean you should. Because there is a pattern in the scriptures. Every time a human manages to change the divine plan through supplication, negotiation, or pure willpower, the consequences are complex. Abraham negotiates with God to save Sodom if 50 righteous are found, then 45, then 40, decreasing to 10. God accepts each term, but not even 10 are found, and Sodom is still destroyed anyway. Moses convinces God not to destroy the Israelites after the incident of the golden calf. God agrees, but the Israelites still wander the desert for 40 years, and all that generation dies before entering the promised land. And now Hezekiah negotiates for an extra 15 years. He receives exactly what he asked for. But the son born during those borrowed years destroys everything his father built. It's as if the universe had a budget, and when you spend credit in one area, the cost appears in another. The time that Hezekiah gained did not come from nowhere. It came from somewhere. And that place, apparently, was the future of his nation. Now, the question that historians and archaeologists have pursued for decades, what exactly was King Ahaz's sundial? Because that is central to everything. If the miracle happened, it happened there. We know it existed. References to it appear not only in biblical texts, but also in later descriptions of Jerusalem. It was some kind of ladder or structure with marked steps, designed by King Ahaz, Hezekiah's father, to measure the passage of time through shadow projection. Attempts to reconstruct it have generated fascinating theories. Some suggest it was similar to Egyptian sundials, a ladder oriented to capture the movement of the sun throughout the day. Others propose it was more complex, perhaps incorporating water or mirrors to create optical effects that made reading the time easier. But everyone agrees on one thing. For the shadow to retreat 10 degrees, something fundamental about sunlight had to change, and not locally, globally. What takes us back to those astronomical records of Babylon and China? The Babylonians, obsessed with tracking the skies, noticed something in the same year. Their clay tablets, now in museums, show disturbances in the expected patterns of solar movement. The Chinese astronomers of the Zhou dynasty recorded what they called the sun moving backward through space by several degrees during a specific period. These are not cultures that shared mythologies with Israel. They had no reason to invent stories that matched Hebrew narratives, and yet the records align. Skeptics point out that dating ancient texts is imprecise, that we are talking about margins of error of decades or even centuries, that correlating an event in Jerusalem with an entry on a Babylonian tablet is methodologically problematic. And they are right, it is problematic, but the fact that multiple independent cultures recorded solar anomalies within overlapping time windows suggests that something occurred. Something sufficiently unusual to be documented by scribes who normally only recorded eclipses and comets. And then there is silence. Because after this event, after the sun retreated and Hezekiah was healed and Jerusalem was saved, you would expect this story to become the centerpiece of everything. You would expect every subsequent king to use it as evidence of divine favor. You would expect temples built to commemorate the day when time was reversed. But that does not happen. The story is briefly mentioned in biblical texts and then almost disappears. There are no annual festivals celebrating the miracle of the sundial. There are no preserved hymns singing about the day the universe bowed. It is as if, after it happened, everyone tacitly agreed not to talk too much about it. Why? One theory is that the event was so disturbing, so fundamentally unsettling, that even those who witnessed it preferred to downplay it. Because if time can be reversed, if the laws of physics are negotiable, then nothing is stable. The entire structure of reality becomes provisional. And that is not a comfortable idea to live with. It is easier to remember Hezekiah as a good king who reformed the worship and survived the Assyrians. The part where he negotiated with God and gained 15 years stolen from fate, the part where the sun retreated as evidence of the deal, that part is better left in the footnotes. There is another detail that is rarely mentioned. When Hezekiah was healed, when Jerusalem was saved, ambassadors from Babylon came to visit him. Officially, it was a diplomatic mission to congratulate him on his recovery. But the biblical text says something else. They came to ask about the miracle that had happened in the land. They did not ask about his illness. They asked about the miracle, about the astronomical event, which means that the news of what happened with the sun spread beyond Jerusalem. Other nations knew about it, and they wanted explanations. Hezekiah, in a moment of pride or perhaps naivety, showed them everything. He showed them his treasures, his arsenals, his storerooms. He gave a complete tour of his kingdom. And Isaiah, the same prophet who had negotiated his healing, confronts him afterward. What have you shown them in your house? And when Hezekiah admits that he showed them everything, Isaiah pronounces another prophecy. Days will come when everything in your house and all that your ancestors have stored up until today will be taken to Babylon. Nothing will remain. And that is exactly what happens. Generations later, the Babylonians return. Not as curious visitors, as conquerors. They loot the temple, destroy Jerusalem, take the population into exile. And it all begins because Hezekiah, in his moment of triumph, could not resist showing what he had achieved during his 15 borrowed years. So, what really remained of those 15 years? A son who destroyed his father's legacy, a nation that eventually fell before the same Babylonians who came to admire the miracle, and a historical record so uncomfortable that it was almost erased from collective memory. But there is more. There is a reason why this story survived, why it was written, why it was preserved despite all the reasons to forget it. And it is this. It demonstrates something about the nature of supplication, about the relationship between the human and the divine, that no other story demonstrates so clearly. It shows that it is possible to negotiate, that it is possible to present your case, that it is possible, under specific circumstances and with the right kind of argument, to change what seemed inevitable. But it also shows that what you gain in that negotiation comes with a cost. Always. No exception. Hezekiah gained 15 years and lost the future of his nation. He gained time and lost control over how that time would be used. He received exactly what he asked for and discovered, too late, that he should have been more careful with his wishes. There is a line in the Talmud that comments on this story. It says that Hezekiah had the potential to be the Messiah, that if he had sung a song of praise after being saved from Sennacherib, if he had responded to the miracle with the right response, human history would have ended differently. But he did not sing. He was proud. He showed his treasures to the Babylonians. And the moment passed. The potential was wasted, and history continued its broken course. We don't know if that is theologically accurate, but it is narratively perfect because it captures something true about how these moments work. There are windows, moments where the impossible becomes possible, where the rules loosen, where you can ask for something you shouldn't be able to have. And sometimes, inexplicably, you receive it. But what you do with it, how you respond to receiving the impossible, determines whether it was a gift or a curse. Hezekiah asked for more time. The universe bowed, the sun retreated, and he got exactly what he asked for. But the extra time didn't come with instructions. It didn't come with guarantees. It only came with an implicit warning he couldn't hear until it was too late. Be careful what you ask for, because you might receive it. And then you'll have to live with the consequences. There are people at this moment who are negotiating, who are begging for more time, for another opportunity, for a reversal of some sentence that feels final. And some of them will receive it. They will get their miracle. The universe will bend, the rules will be broken, and they will be given exactly what they asked for. And then they will discover what Hezekiah discovered, that miracles are not happy endings. They are complicated beginnings. They are borrowed time with compound interest. They are doors that open to futures that were not meant to exist, filled with consequences that cannot be predicted. So the question is not whether you should ask for a miracle. The question is, are you prepared to live in the world that this miracle creates? Are you ready for the versions of yourself, your children, your future that only exist because you forced open a door that was closed? Because once the sun recedes, once time reverses, once the impossible becomes real, you cannot undo it. You can only live with it and discover, year after borrowed year, whether the price you were told no one would tell you had to pay was worth it.